Welcome to the Fit for Business and Life podcast, brought to you in partnership with Sharp Fit for Life and the Business Buddy Network, improving the performance and transforming busy or overweight professionals, business owners and consultants and their teams to become fitter, happier and more confident. The Fit for Business and Life podcast is all about sharing passion, knowledge and expertise around business and personal performance. From our host, myself, Martin Sharp, a 30-year change maker in businesses large and small, and Dominic Furness, a world traveller and life enthusiast, plus special guests, which today includes the amazing Stephen Leggett. Stephen Leggett is the wellness codebreaker, also known as the diabetes destroyer, who is an international speaker, radio personality, author, and CEO of Reversing Resistance, building the world's most successful healing system for reversing chronic conditions. Stephen launched his first company in 1999, specializing in mentoring large corporates to release value from cultural, behavioral, and process change. His passion, however, comes from achieving transformation at an individual level. He has applied his skills of NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, as a practitioner to design his program, including a signature program of reversing type 2 diabetes. Having reversed his own conditions 20 years ago, have him have the condition. So I'd like to welcome Stephen Leggett.
Martin, thank you very much for having me on the show. I'm delighted.
You're absolutely welcome. And just to be full transparent with everybody, we just had a technical issue, so we're redoing this episode. So it's going to be quite an interesting one, because we've already had a lot of this conversation personally, but I think there's such a wider kind of conversation to have with everybody here. So 20 years ago, you reversed diabetes, and we were saying earlier that wasn't the first time either.
It wasn't quite 20 years ago. I had diabetes for 20 years before I decided to reverse it for the last time. And you're quite right, I'd done it before. You know, when I'd done it before, as early as 2004, when I'd only had diabetes for 5 years, it was all about diet and exercise. And these two things are really important legs on a stool. But of course, if you've ever tried to sit on a stool with two legs, you'll realise that after a while you fall on your arse, and you need that third leg. So this time when I did it, Martin, the diet and exercise stuff was kind of straightforward. It was a bicycle I'd ridden before, but to come to what the third leg was took a little more work, and it took me certainly outside of the comfort zone that that I'd been kind of in the groove with for the last 20 years, and so really what this third leg is, it's about spirit. It's about
just hold for a second there, because I think there's a few interesting pieces we've already come out of this. So you managed to reverse diabetes a few times, so it's not like the first time you've done it. And each time, all you've used is kind of diet and exercise. And this to me is quite astounding, that actually something as simple as things that everyone has access to, you can use to reverse diabetes. And that's kind of, but I get the feeling though, what you're almost saying is there's still a missing component, because obviously this keeps recurring.
There is, because the adherence, the ability to stick to a program, to stick to a lifestyle, a new lifestyle, really has to be quite resilient against those knocks that come in, death of a friend, a family member, it could be, being made redundant at work or whatever. But these very, very stressful situations can serve to shake us, to shake our being, and anything that isn't really flexible enough to deal with this will mean that you contract back to the person that you were. And so for me, when I found out what this missing piece was, it was really, it just made perfect sense to me, because I changed my diet and my exercise routines. But what I'd not changed, Martin, was me. I hadn't spent the time changing the version of me that was in here. So of course I would always revert to core when faced with a difficult situation.
Yeah, and I think as you were saying earlier, that kind of that moment where you're looking at how to change you. At the first, you didn't realize you needed to change, and it was really that kind of calling from your wife that kind of gave you that wake up call.
Yeah, it was when she asked me to go to this mind, body, and spirit fair. Some woo-woo rubbish that I'd never would never even touch my life before. But at the essence, the core of what she was asking was right, which is you need to do something different. Because what is it they say? The definition of madness is by doing more of what you've always done and expecting a different result. And we do this a lot in our work, don't we, as well, that when things are going bad at work, we decide to throw more and more time at it, but not to do anything different. And I needed to do something different. My life was tremendously important to me. I have a young son, that I want to see thrive, and I want to see have children. And I couldn't do that with type 2 diabetes because the outcome was so poor.
Yeah. And I think as we spoke about earlier, you're almost catalyst for this last kind of key change where you've actually not only just listened to your wife, but you've kind of then put a lot of things into action that all came from your son.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. That was a real catalyst moment for me. It was not when it was initially, I thought it was maybe when Paul, my friend, basically had his leg amputated as a result of diabetes. But no, it was the impact of that on my son, and the whole imagining bit that his dad is going to have his leg cut off as well because he's got type 2 diabetes. The inevitability of that was the thing that really shook me, because that's the thing that had the emotional context for me and shook me into action, and shook me into looking for a solution that I'd never looked at before.
Yeah, that's quite important, isn't it? Because a lot of us, especially when you're in business, you kind of think actually we do a lot of decisions for logical reasons, because you've thought about it, you've measured the pros and cons, you can see exactly what's going to happen next, and in fact, this is probably one of the bigger areas in business which causes issues, because people want to have so much certainty the decision they're going to make is the right one that they procrastinate too long for it. When the reality is, as people, we're actually very emotional animals. We do things for emotional reasons. And in fact, whether you call it the monkey mind, the reptilian brain, or however it is, that's the first thing that actually gets activated whenever you're in any kind of situation. So for you, I can see exactly why that kind of key emotional moment kind of gave you that kind of springboard into some form of action. So what did that action look like? What happened at this Mind, Body, Spirit event?
It's funny. We were talking about emotions right now, and effectively that was my learning. I've been working with energy healers for a long time now, but that was my learning that my diabetes. I don't say that anymore because I don't own it at all. It's just a name that people give a bag of conditions, but that condition of type 2 diabetes had its source a long way back in my history. All the traumas, this was compounded over years and years, and there was some generational stuff as well. All these generational issues, together with issues in my own life, etc., had accumulated on my body and caused misalignments within my body that actually created the space for this type 2 diabetes to develop. And the lifestyle that went along with that was almost secondary, really, because it was that emotional context, it was that emotional trapping of energy in my body that was breaking down the perfect way of working that God gave us for our organs and things like that, and meant that, they were looking for shortcuts and divert here and go there and whatever. It's like having major roads closed or whatever. And it was, I realised that the secret sauce was to have diet, to have exercise, but also to remove all these constraints, all these misalignments of energy that we've got, so our bodies can work perfectly, so that my body could work perfectly. I'm not saying I've got the perfect body, Martin, but it works for the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I loved it when you sometimes say you're a successful diabetic, and that always makes me smile. And it's kind of like you kind of own that condition, you own that kind of label. And I love what you were saying there with regards to the whole generational piece, because sometimes it's a big thing. I know from my own personal experience, I can track mine back. So my me being overweight, a lot of my family is overweight. And in fact, if you go back, people like my gran, she was an amazing feeder. She would always make sure there's food on the table. You'd never go away hungry. And I remember the first time I tried to lose some weight, and I said we used to go around to visit her on a weekend and have lunch with her. So she'd get fish and chips out, and then there'd be sandwiches, and then there'd be like cakes, and there'd be ice cream, etc. I said, I'm trying to lose weight. Can we just kind of hold back on a few things? And the following week went round, and the same again: fish and chips, the sandwiches, there's cakes and things. And says, okay, well, what have you kind of cut out? She says, I haven't put the biscuits out. And it's simple things, right? And that was her genuinely trying to help. It wasn't anything else. So when you've kind of got this generational thing, and it could be even simpler things than that. For example, as a society, we tend to celebrate with food. You have a wedding, you'll have a wedding breakfast. You have a birthday, you'll have a birthday cake. You've done something amazing at work, you'll go out for a few drinks. It's a natural thing to do. It's just almost like associate the two things together. So I can completely get the whole idea of actually you've got not just your own body, your own mind, your own experiences to deal with, but then you've kind of got the whole of your generational experiences, your family experiences and expectations that kind of have to be managed as well.
And what's really interesting, Martin, is it goes back even further than that. So when I'm doing energy work with clients in order to unpack their stuckness or their health condition, then some of these things go back 14, 17, 24 generations. And at the point of origin, something, and the subconscious never needs to tell me what that is in any exactitude in order for me to release it, but something happened within that context and that history and that chronological date in history that was, if you like, best described as a trauma event, probably completely benign right now to us in our present, but it had been something that had shaken their world or their value system so much that hurt, that pain, that emotion that couldn't be dealt with at the time actually becomes part of your DNA. So that generational context that you had 24 years ago can become part of your genetic makeup. So in dealing with your condition right now in this generation, you're actually having a positive impact on future generations. Now, I'm not saying you'll see the genes of your children change, because they won't within that lifetime, but when they have children, they then have the possibility, because that energy is not there anymore, that their genes will be made in a different way, that condition that has gone back 14 generations in your family no longer exists, because it's been recognized, it's been acknowledged, and working with you, we've released them. Don't ask me for lots of evidence around that, because I have to wait for the next 3 generations before that happens. But I can absolutely tell you that will happen, because we are we are pure beings of energy. Yeah. So
I think science is Yeah, science is just about starting to catch up with some of these things. So there's lots of conversations around things like epigenetics, around what you eat, what the environment that you're in, the stresses that you have that can get passed down, and kind of not just something that affects you personally at that point in time. And again, studies back to some of the horrors that kind of happened during World War II, and actually now seeing how that's played out through the generations afterwards. I know there was a big study with regards to what happened during the Dutch famine during World War II, and actually what's happened to those people and then the further generations. So I think science is starting to catch up on some of these elements and starting to colour in where people have known maybe for years, if not decades or centuries, how it works. It's a bit like, for example, when you look at the difference between Eastern medicine and Western medicine, there's some things that people would scoff at when they look at the Eastern medicine from a Western point of view. But now the science is catching up and saying actually some of this stuff fundamentally it's right, but they might have not explained it in the right kind of way. It's a bit like I'll take a muscle building example. If you go back to this 50s, 60s, 70s, and you talk about things like shock the muscle and stuff like that. That's the way that they describe things to actually work. You give it so different stimuluses and things, and it wasn't until science kind of caught up and then understood about the laws of specific adaptations through posed demands that then started to make sense. Yes, if you change the demands you give your muscles, then it has to grow, it has to change to make it. So they might not have known the scientific reason for it back in the 60s and 70s, but they knew it worked. So they knew the effects, the cause and the effect type of thing. So it's really interesting things like that, and then seeing how that kind of generational thing is going to move forward.
I think we're in a particularly exciting eon, if you like, at the moment, because a lot of these traditional things, and we look back at shamans that used to exist, hundreds of years ago, and all those kind of belief-based systems. The science is almost validating those hundreds of years later. Yeah, and that's what science is, isn't it? It's about the methodical recording of an observation. So the magic is already there. Science just has a new way of explaining that. That's how I look at it. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, it's exactly true. Things that we do today, which seems to be every day. Take it back a few hundred years, it would look like magic because they don't understand how it works. So 100%. I think you're spot on with that. So coming back to obviously you started working with a lot more energy workers, and you're kind of working on that side of things. And how's that impacted? What's the kind of things you've taken away to implement in your own personal life?
Right. So what has been really interesting is my view of the world, my complete view of the world has changed. The way I don't react in the same way to things. I found that space between observation and response, and now I'm in control of that space, rather than it being a synaptic connection between somebody cuts you up on the road and you swear at them, abuse, hurl them loads of abuse. I now have a space between those two events so that I can decide, I can take control of what my response is to any one of those conditions. And I think that's the biggest thing that I've gained, Martin. I think there are some other things as well, that my whole map of the world has changed now, because I see possibilities where before I only saw things happening and thought to myself, oh no, why has that happened to me? Why has that happened to me? Now I have a complete reframing, because I say, oh wow, what can I learn from that then? Because each of these events is an opportunity to learn and to grow and to evolve. So they're actually opportunities, they're actually, pauses to celebrate and say, wow, I've had this experience now. What can I learn from that? How does that help me on my next stage of evolution? So it's a great sensitivity.
And it's really interesting you're saying about that whole pattern interrupt effectively you put in place. And things like, for example, people cutting you up in cars. It's just so normal, and for many, it is an issue. You know, you get the road rage, the red mist, whatever you want to call it. But getting to that position where actually you can like think something such as, you know, what kind of bad day is that person having to actually want to go away and do that what they're doing. And that kind of pattern interrupt is a really nice way of being able to inject that kind of thought and then stop your emotional side from just taking over and going into whichever direction it's going to take you. But it does take that moment to load it. I think was it Dr. Stephen Peters that did a lot of work in that kind of space around the fact that it takes like seconds for your reptilian brain, your monkey mind, effectively to react, where it takes maybe a minute or so for your cerebral side to actually catch up and interrupt that before it does anything. So you've got to almost pre-program that interrupt.
Yes, you have. But I tend to deal with it from an emotional point of view, because there's a reason why you react like that in that situation. And if you can go behind the curtains, if you will, and understand what's creating that synaptic response from A to B, then effectively you are immediately removing it. So that all you've got between A and B now is your thought and your intended action. So it makes it a much bigger space to work in. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. Makes very good sense. So tell us a little bit about what it's like working with you, because obviously we've gone through you. We know you've kind of recovered from diabetes. You've been able to successfully do this for years. You've kind of got this great passion that's underpinned by, like you say, that legacy that you want to leave, that generational legacy with your son and with your grandchildren eventually, with luck. So what's it kind of like now working with you? Because you're doing this with so many other people as well and helping them through that transition.
Martin, it's wonderful. I'm a wonderful person to work with. No, it's very bespoke. So effectively, as we talked about before, where we said everybody's body is different. Everybody is different. So I work with clients to first of all understand their baseline. How did they get here in the first place? How did their condition develop? When did it first start? All that kind of background stuff. Then we start doing, we put a plan in place. And, you know, some clients are different. Sometimes they really want to go very, very fast, and they want to spend a lot of time on a diet, exercise, and do the healing at the same time. And that's okay. We can do that. But at the end of the day, it's not really about speed. It's about the outcome. So anyway, I cut a plan that's individual to each client's need for their particular condition or state of mind. And then we start the healing work. In general, I put healing above everything else, because if the mind isn't in the right place, if the head's not in the right place, if you're thinking in the old way of thinking before we started doing the work, then whatever you do from a nutritional point of view or from an exercise point of view may help, but as we discussed before, you're going to revert to what you know best. You're going to revert to something that is core to your identity. So we need to get to the emotional context of that identity first. Peel away those bits that aren't supporting you, and then allow you as that new person to then move forward with a nutritional plan, with an exercise plan that's right for you. But then I'll talk a little bit about nutrition here, because I'm not a great fan of diets, you know, this diet or that diet. I'm not wedded to a diet. What I want to give my clients is the tools so that they can determine what foods are nutritious for them, what foods are inflammatory for their body, because things like type 2 diabetes are conditions of inflammation, and then can retest regularly, because these things change. Our bodies react differently to the food we put in based on it might be our age, or it might be something else that's going on, but it's not a static picture. And I believe in giving clients a tool so that they can move with their life moments and they can realign as they need to.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that, because your body doesn't stand still. The fact that you age every day is certainly one simple view of that you can actually see the changes happen. We get the whiter hairs in the beard these days, and get the more wrinkles on the side of the face, hopefully more laughter lines. So it is a simple indicator that life does not stand still, and you do have to have those skills to change as the times do change with them. So it's great to hear you're enabling your clients with the same thing. So if people want to get in touch with you, then what's kind of the best ways for them to do so?
So the best way is probably if you want to go to my website, that's www.thediabetesdestroyer.com. I would also encourage you to have a look at what there is there on YouTube. I've got some shows and some interesting testimonials of others that have worked with me, so that might be a useful visit to you. You can find me at the diabetes_destroyer. The diabetes_destroyer. And then Facebook. I'm also on Facebook and TikTok, and you'll be able to find me via my name or my handle, which is typically the diabetes_destroyer. So do some, find out about me, just see what I'm doing, see what other clients have said about me, and then be comfortable with the outcome you have in mind. Pick up the phone, give me a call. I'm here waiting for you.
Brilliant. No, that's great, and I hope people do actually pick you up on that. So we'll leave all those links to all those places in the caption or the description, depending on which platform you're looking at this on, whether it's going to be on YouTube, whether it's be on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you're listening to, whichever your favourite platform is. I think the only thing that's left to say today is just a big thank you, Stephen, for your time, your expertise, your love and your guidance for everybody who's been listening. And look forward to speaking again sometime in the future. Until then, I'd like to say a big thank you for taking the time out to listen to this episode of the Fit for Business and Life podcasts. The Fit for Business and Life podcast has been brought to you by Sharp Fit for Life and the Business Body Network. And it's part of being able to help people to become happier, healthier, and even more higher achieving in business and in life. And if you'd like to join us as a guest or get in touch to know more about the topics being covered, then we'd love to hear from you. Simple email hello@sharpfitforlife.com. But once again, thank you for listening to the Sharp Fit for Life Business and Life podcast on the Certain to Change series. And look, we'll speak to you all later. Bye-bye.